Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. This is Kazu here of the Wormforge. Today we're going to be covering a patch 8 Baldur's Gate 3 build that I call the Shadowblade Songstress. This is going to be a multi-classing build combining the Bladesinger Wizard, which is a new subclass, with the Thief Rogue to allow you to play a dual-wielding spell sword who can deal absurd amounts of damage while getting all over the battlefield, tons of mobility, a good amount of tankiness just from having extremely high AC, and of course we crit on 19s, so we can do really chunky burst damage with our Shadowblade. The point of this multi-class build is to give you guys a Spellblade that is not solely reliant on their spell slots to get things done. Of course, if you have a haste spell, you can deal a ton of damage. If you have the shield spell, you can protect yourself from taking a ton of damage. But you do not need to have these things. You're going to be making 4 attacks per turn once you get your extra attack and your 2-second bonus action, regardless of what you're doing. And you have the rogue levels, which means you have cunning action, you can disengage from your enemies, you can dash away, you're going to have tons of mobility and repositioning capabilities. And then of course, once you want to deal AoE damage, you have your wizard levels, you have your big spell slots to dish out huge battlefield control, AoE damage, whatever you need. It's extremely flexible. Did I mention that the Bladesing can actually heal you as well? So you're very self-reliant. You have damage, you've got tankiness, you've got healing, and overall this is just going to be an incredibly fun multi-class. So check out the rest of the montage footage, you guys, and then we're going to get straight into the build. Greetings, adventurers. This is Kazu of the Wormforge here, and today we're going to be going over the Shadowblade Songstress build. This is a multi-class of Bladesinger Wizard as well as Thief Rogue, combining the two to make a character who is extremely adept at dual-wielding blades, dealing tons of damage up close and personal, while still having the full utility of a spellcaster like a wizard in their back pocket. So to go ahead and get started, we are going to be taking our first level in Rogue. This is assuming you're actually using this character throughout your entire campaign and not constantly respecing them. But the reason why first level Rogue is so nice is because it gets you some additional skill proficiencies. So if we take a look here, we get 4 skill proficiencies. If we started with Wizard, we'd only have 2. We're going to go ahead and pick Investigation and take expertise in that, as well as expertise in sleight of hand for lockpicking. So this character can serve as both the main dexterity character in your party as well as an intelligence based character because, well, Wizard is the only class that scales off intelligence. So for our stat spread, we're going to want to bump our intelligence as high as we can. We really want to get it all the way up to 16. That way, if we do cast any spells, we want our spell mod and our spell save DC to be pretty decent. Of course, dexterity is our main focus because we are going to be killing things in close combat with melee weapons. So let's go ahead and take that level up. All right, now at level 2, we are immediately going to jump over to Wizard, take whatever cantrips you want, but I'd say Firebolt for range, and then Booming Blade is going to be our bread and butter for melee. This is a brand new cantrip added in patch 8. This is going to allow you to deal an additional 1d8 thunder damage when a target moves after you've hit them with the Booming Blade. Now once you get to level 5, you deal another 1d8 thunder damage on your weapon attacks, and then if they move, they take 2d8, and at level 11, that bumps up by another d8, so you're dealing 2d8 thunder damage on the actual attack, and they're taking 3d8 thunder damage if they move. So that's a lot of damage that's going to add up over time, and lovely enough, if you're using things like haste or the elixir bloodlust, you're going to be able to use Booming Blade multiple times. It seems that not only for the Bladesinger, but any class can just use Booming Blade to replace one of their attacks. I'm not sure if that was me just trying out the Hexblade, but it seemed like it worked for both the Hexblade as well as for the Eldritch Knight Fighter in addition to the Bladesinger. Kind of a weird interaction that's not supposed to work normally. It's just supposed to be the Bladesinger. But hey, this is BG3, not 5e, so we're not going to worry about that too much. Going over our spells, what you really want to have is the defensive spells. So Mage Armor, Shield. Shield is going to be what's going to keep us alive in the early game. Protection from good and evil as well. This will protect you by giving disadvantage on attack rolls made against you from all sorts of different creatures. We're going to want Longstrider for mobility, Enhanced Leap for mobility. And then even we can take Find Familiar for that extra friend who can take a little bit of damage, or Featherfall. Now, jumping into the second level of Wizards is where we finally get the Bladesinger subclass. This was added in by patch 8. Bladesinging is going to give you, the School of Bladesinging is going to give you the following features. The Bladesong Power, which we're going to cover in a sec, and Training in War and Song. That's going to give you proficiency in light armor and the performance skill. Not very good for us, doesn't really matter much. The proficiency with the weapons we actually already get from Rogue. So this feature doesn't really matter much, but what does matter is the Bladesong ability. This is going to give you a bonus to AC, increase your movement speed by 10 feet, give you advantage on acrobatics checks, as well as a bonus to your Constitution saving throws. Now, this bonus for your AC and con saves is going to increase to +3 at level 5 and +4 at level 9. So those are kind of the capping points that you want to get your Bladesinger to, at the very least, up to level 9, so that you have a +4 to AC and con saves. Now, we are going to talk about options later on, but at the moment, we are going to be focusing on Wizard. So we're going to go ahead and take Magic Missile, always a great spell to have to finish enemies, and then Featherfall, good as well. For the Bladesinger's weapon, my weapon of choice is going to be Short Sword, as we are going to be dual wielding with this build. You could go with any of the other weapons, but keep in mind Longsword and Rapiers cannot be dual wielded, not unless you have the dual wielder feat, which is an entire feat worth of investment. Now, there is discussion up for that later, but it's going to be difficult to beat the Shadowblade, which is a light finesse weapon, so I say we may as well just stick with light finesse weapons. So we're going with Short Sword. That's going to be our spell focus. Leveling up, we get to level 3, and once we get to level 3 in Wizard, you know, normally you get the ability score improvement or feat, which would be very big, but I'll tell you what, level 4 is very big for this multi-class because we get Shadowblade. Now, Shadowblade is a second level spell that lasts until your long rest. It does not require concentration like it does in D&D 5e. You will deal 2d8 psychic damage plus your dex mod because it is a light finesse weapon. And you also have advantage on the attack rolls if the target's in dim light or darkness, which, surprisingly enough, especially in Act 1, is going to come up very frequently. So you're getting advantage constantly on your enemies. Amazing. It's going to always allow you to proc your sneak attack. No brainer, we are going with the Shadowblade. Additionally, if you want to take a survivability spell, I recommend Mirror Image or Blur. Blur is going to be really solid early on, but at the moment, we're going to take Mirror Image because we're going to be using that later on in the build. Alright, level 5, we're going to get level 4 in Wizard. We get another cantrip. Really, you can take whatever you want. We'll be taking Blade Ward in this case. Additionally, we get some bonus spells. So we're going to take Hold Person, and we're going to take Magic Weapon. Magic Weapon, you can pretty much use this to have +1 to your attack rolls and damage rolls at all times. This is going to be concentration, but the duration lasts until long rest. So you can pretty much squeeze the value out of your second level spell slots if you really want to. Now for our feat, we are going straight plain and simple, increasing our dexterity up to 19. Of course, you could increase it by just 1 if you wanted to take a half feat such as athlete. But I say increase it to 19, and then if you want, you can take the hag's hair and bump it up to 20. All right. Now, once we get to level 6, we have Wizard level 5. We are going to get 3rd level spells. We are immediately taking Haste. Haste is going to give us +2 to AC, as well as the hastened action, which means that we can pretty much take a full set of another attacks. Now, if you're using the Tactician mode difficulty settings, you are only going to be able to make 1 attack with the hasted attack. That's totally fine. Either way, you're boosting your action economy. You're getting a bonus to AC, making you even harder to hit. You just have to maintain concentration, which is where our Bladesong comes in so handy at helping us to maintain concentration against damaging effects. So we're taking haste. We're also taking counterspell to prevent enemies from casting spells that could CC us while we are hasted. And then once we hit level 7 and level 6 in Wizard, then we are going to have access to some more spells, but more importantly, we get access to extra attack. So we can finally make 2 attacks rather than 1, and of course, one of those attacks can be a Booming Blade cantrip. So we're going to be dealing tons of damage because we have extra attack alongside of our Shadowblade. And at this point, you can cast your Shadowblade at 3rd level to increase the damage from 2d8 to 3d8 plus 5. So that's going to be really big. For our spells, we're going to be taking Hypnotic Pattern as well as Fireball. That's going to kind of even out our kit for AoE damage and crowd control. And at this point, once you hit level 8 is when you can finally start dipping back into Rogue. You have pretty much everything you need out of Bladesinger. You're going to be hitting tons of times, up to 4 times if you're hasted and you have extra attack and you make an offhand weapon attack. You're going to be dealing lots of damage, but we finally have some space to breathe, so we're going to put level 8 into Rogue. That's going to give us Cunning Action, which will allow us to hide, dash, and disengage as a bonus action. That's going to make us a lot more nimble on the battlefield. We don't have the MOBO feat, but hey, we have the disengage action if we want to hit an enemy, disengage, and then have them walk up to us and proc Booming Blade. Alright, and then once we get to level 9, that is when we will finally get access to our Rogue subclass. So the subclass we're going with is Thief. Now honestly, all of these are pretty viable options. Arcane Trickster if you want more spells. We have Assassin if you want to be able to burst out opponents in the first round. We have Swashbuckler, the brand new subclass, if you want to add a little bit of spiciness. You basically get the mobile feat from Fancy Footwork. You can ignore AOPs if you've already made a melee attack against a target. And then also you get a bonus to initiative rolls, and you also don't need to have advantage to trigger sneak attack. You can trigger your sneak attack far more easier. Honestly, it's not a bad choice, but Thief overall is going to be a huge increase to our damage because we're getting that additional bonus action attack. So now we can mix it up. We can use it for cunning action, but also we can just make another offhand attack. Very powerful. This is going to be a decent boost to damage, especially with how many buffs we're going to have from our items. So that's pretty much what we're going with. Once we hit level 10, we are going to go back to Wizard. We're going to get 7th level in Wizard, which is going to give us access to 4th level spell slots. What spells are we taking? Greater Invis is an incredibly powerful one for giving you advantage on all your attacks and disadvantage against enemies. You just have to keep in mind, some enemies can try to detect you while you're invisible, and they will break your invisibility. Also, what we can take is the Banishment spell, a very powerful crowd control, or Dimension Door for mobility and utility. We're going to go with Dimension Door and Greater Invis. Alright, and at level 11, we are level 8 in Wizard, which means we can take more spells, but also we get a feat or ability score improvement. Now, for our additional spells, we're going to be taking Fire Shield because that is something you can always have in combat. It's not necessarily useful on the Bladesinger because our AC is going to be so high, but in some situations we can get a lot of value if we're getting hit a lot as the only target. And then we're going to take Banishment, which is just a clutch CC spell to remove an enemy off the battlefield. Now for our feat, we of course have Dex at 19. If you took the Hag's Hair and you got Dex at 20, you got flexibility. You can take Lucky, you can take Mage Slayer, you can take Resilient. Resilient I definitely recommend, especially Resilient Wisdom, because you are going to struggle against effects that cause fear or charm or things that are a Wisdom saving throw. So I recommend taking Resilient Wisdom if you have the space for it. But if you still have your dex at 19 because you did not take the Hag's Hair, go ahead and take Athlete, and we're going to bump up our dexterity to a max of 20. Now, Athlete is going to increase our jump distance by 50 feet. It's going to make it so that we use less movement when we're knocked prone. Strength saves are our biggest weakness, so you will get knocked prone from time to time, and this is going to save you a lot of movement so you can stay in melee battle, especially when you have enhanced jump. Stack that with the jump distance being increased by 50%, you're going to be flying across the map. You're going to have loads of mobility, and you don't really have to worry too much about wasting your bonus action to jump because you have 2 bonus actions. Now, we finally hit our level cap at level 12. Wizard is going to be level 9, which means we get another use of our Bladesong, and it's going to be capped at the bonus of being +4 to our AC and +4 to Constitution saving throws. Additionally, we do get 5th level spells. That being said, we're going to be using our 5th level spell slot on Shadowblade every single time. And then if you want, you can get back your 5th level spell slot from your arcane lore or whatever that feature is called that gives you back some spell slots, and then we can use that on Conjure Elemental or Hold Monster. Additionally, if you want some AoE, you could take Cone of Code. That's always a great option, but for me, these 2 spells, Conjure Elemental and Hold Monster, are going to give you the most value. Conjure Elemental going to be a good tool for distraction, whereas Hold Monster is going to paralyze the enemy so you can deal huge damage to them. So that's pretty much going to be it for the build. Now, something I forgot to mention about the blade singing is that over the course of the 10 turns that this buff lasts for, you are going to have access to the Bladesong finisher. At any point, you can use a bonus action to unleash the finisher. You're going to travel a distance and then explode in an AoE. You will accumulate Bladesong damage charges every single time you cast a leveled spell, and you will accumulate Bladesong healing charges every single time you attack with a weapon. So for our build, we're going to be stacking tons of healing charges, not so much the damage charges. When you use the finisher, you're going to explode. You're going to deal 1d6 force damage for each damage charge you have, and you're going to heal 1d6 HP for every healing charge that you have. This is going to be extremely useful for the survivability and sustain of this build. Alright, so that's going to be pretty much it for the level up progression. Now, we're going to talk about some equipment and gear. Again, the gear choice is kind of up to you. There is a ton of items in Baldur's Gate 3 that specifically work for Spellblades, so it really shouldn't be too hard to pick out your gear. But if you need some pointers, what I highly recommend you take is the Ring of Arcane Synergy. Now, this is going to give you Arcane Synergy whenever you deal damage with a cantrip, such as Firebolt or Moving Blade. It will allow you to add additional damage equal to your spellcasting mod on weapon attacks. Now, if our spellcasting mod is 16, that's a +3, which means we get +3 damage to all our weapon attacks. And if we're making 4 to 5 to 6 even weapon attacks per turn, that's going to add up very quickly. We also have the Strange Conduit Ring. This is going to add 1d4 psychic damage on our weapon attacks while we're concentrating on a spell. And we're always going to be concentrating on a spell because we got haste, we got magic weapon, we got other sorts of things like hypnotic pattern or banishment. There's pretty much always going to be a spell that you're concentrating on when you're in the middle of a fight, and that means you're going to be getting tons of bonus damage from this item. Now, additionally, if you want more damage, and for me, at least with the Bladesinger build, I wanted to just see how much damage I could really pump in terms of items. We have, actually, we're going to start from the top. We have Horns of the Berserker. This is going to be a helmet that gives you a +2 to attack rolls when attacking creatures that have already taken damage. So it's going to make you much more reliable in hitting enemies as long as you damage them. It's also going to give you a bonus 2 necrotic damage on weapon attacks, as long as you don't have full health. And it will deal ticking damage. You might think, oh, that's going to be bad because it might make you drop concentration on haste, but realistically, you have such a high bonus on constitution saves, you're pretty much never going to drop concentration just from the Horns of Berserker. It would be very unlikely. Next up, we have Cloak of the Weave. Of course, you could just replace this with a Cloak of Protection if you don't have anything else. The Cloak of the Weave is going to give us a bonus to our spell save DC and spell attack rolls, and also the Absorb Element spell, which is very, very nice, especially if we're taking a shit ton of elemental damage from something like a breath weapon attack or chain lightning or whatever else have you. Next up we have is Viconia's Priestess Robe. No joke, this is just for swag. I have my Cleric cast Shield of Faith on me so I can get the bonus to saves, which is very helpful. But to be honest with you, I think the best pickup is going to be Robe of the Weave. This is going to give you another +2 AC. You will gain a +1 to your spell save DC and attack rolls, and then also whenever you pass a save, you get a little bit of healing. So this is going to kind of make us a lot more tankier in the fight. It's not going to increase our saves, which admittedly the Priestess Robe is better for that, but the bonus to AC is going to be more substantial. So either one's totally fine. The glove slot is going to be our Helldust gloves. This is going to give us a bonus 1d6 fire damage to all our weapon attacks, in addition to giving us a bonus to spell attack rolls and spell save AC. So even though we are playing a wizard that doesn't have max intelligence, our items are giving us pretty big bonuses to our attack rolls and spell save DC if we do feel like using our spells. Now, last but not least, we got the boots. That's going to be the Helldust boots. This is going to let you ignore difficult terrain. You cannot be forcibly moved, which is actually very powerful. And then with Infernal Evasion, we basically have the ability to auto pass a failed save if our reaction is available. Now, that is extremely potent. The Infernal Evasion, I do believe you can only do that once per day. Might have to double check me on that, but that is really good as a fail safe in case you get hit by a really important saving throw that you fail, such as a Mind Blast, such as a paralysis effect, anything like that. You want to absolutely make sure that you don't fail the save and get screwed over. Now, in terms of gear, what we're going to be using primarily is going to be the Knife of the Undermountain King. As you can see here, this is going to be a short sword, light finesse with a +2 enchantment. It has Organ Rearranger, which means you crit on a 19 or a 20. It's going to reduce the roll needed to crit by 1. So for us, we don't have anything else that's stacking with it, so it's just going to be on a 19 or 20, which with advantage, you're going to actually be critting quite a lot. And also, when you roll 2 damage or less on the reroll, you get to reroll and you take the higher result. So it has a little bit better damage than it might seem on paper. And it also has the synergy with Shadowblade because of its own Shadowblade effect. So it's also going to be getting advantage on attack rolls if the enemy is obscured. Now, of course, as our main weapon, we are going to be using Shadowblade, which if I cast at 5th level, you will see here, it is dealing 4d8 +5 psychic damage. That is absolutely nuts. There's pretty much no other short sword or light finesse weapon you're going to find that's going to be dealing this amount of damage. So it is very much worth your 5th level spell slot. You are going to be absolutely murking most of your foes, especially when you crit. If you're doing Booming Blade with your Shadowblade, I mean, look, the damage is 12 to 59, and almost all of it is damage dice, which means that if you crit, it's going to be doubled up to over 100 damage potentially. So yeah, that's going to be the itemization for the Shadowblade Songstress. Pretty easy. Oh, actually, I didn't go over the necklace for some reason. The necklace, we're going with Amulet of Greater Health, kind of no-brainer. If we're playing a wizard that only has 14 con baseline, we're going to take the Amulet of Greater Health to bump up our health points so that we don't have to worry about getting one-shot by something stupid. Now, of course, before you get this, you can take the Necklace of Elemental Augmentation. When one of your cantrips deals acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage, you add your spellcasting mod to the damage dealt. So this is going to just let us deal a little bit more damage with our Booming Blades. Honestly, not a very big deal on this build in particular, but it's definitely a nice thing to have if you don't have any other options. Fey Semblance Amulet is also going to be great because our saving throws, particularly Wisdom and Charisma, are very bad. So having advantage on those is certainly going to help us in terms of resiliency. And then for alternative helmets, we do have the Helmet of Arcane Acuity. Now, this particular type of Bladesinger build is focused purely on melee. It's focused on being low maintenance, where you don't need a lot of spell slots to be dealing your damage and getting a whole lot done. If you're going to go the other route, you're going to be using spells a lot, then the Helmet of Arcane Acuity is much better for that kind of mix mash of casting spells and then doing melee attacks, casting spells and then doing melee attacks. The focus of this build is dealing tons of damage, being a whirling dervish in melee, without having to rely on actually casting offensive spells all that often. Alright, so getting more into the weeds of things with the technical bit, if you guys are playing on honor mode, then you are probably going to be thinking about the fact that the Psychic Blade, the Shadowblade, it does pure psychic damage. We can most definitely take advantage of the Resonant Stone. And if you don't know what the Resonant Stone is, it's basically an item you can get at the end of Act 2 that will, in an AoE, inflict the condition steeped in bliss. Creatures with this condition are going to have advantage on physical checks, which is strength, con, and dexterity. They are going to have disadvantage on mental saving throws, which is intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. And even worse so, they're going to have vulnerability to psychic damage. So with this weapon and build, using Resonant Stone, you are going to be dishing out 4 times damage if you hit a critical attack, and you do have an increased crit range, so you will be critting quite often. This can be extremely deadly. It's definitely overkill for regular BG3, so if you absolutely need it, by all means go for Resonant Stone. Otherwise, it's not going to be something that I would typically be using. Now, when it comes to the level progression for the Shadowblade Songstress, it's going to be pretty standard. You know, that first level of Rogue might set you back a little bit, but the skill proficiencies you get, and especially the expertise, means that your character is going to be helping out the party in a lot more ways than just combat. You're going to be able to open up chests, disarm traps, etc., etc. You know, do what you can do with investigation and sleight of hand. And then as soon as we get our Bladesinger subclass, then we're going to be able to actually go up in melee. You know, we can cast Mage Armor on ourselves. We'll have like 16 AC at that time, and then we can use our Bladesong to give us another +2 to AC. 18 AC as a wizard is pretty freaking good, considering how you're not wearing any armor or using a shield. You'll actually be able to tank a little bit in the front, but you're going to have to be very cautious, very careful in the early game, especially when your con and your hit die are not helping you whatsoever. You're going to have a very small hit point pool compared to a barbarian or a fighter. Now, that being said, as soon as you can get through those low levels, and you can get your extra attack, then you're going to start dishing out some really serious damage, and your survivability is going to steadily go up as well. It is a little bit reliant on gear, this character. You definitely want to have a good offhand weapon, but of course we're using Shadowblade, so even without a weapon, the Shadowblade is going to be dealing tons of damage, tons of psychic damage. It does scale with the spell levels that we're using for our spell slots, so do keep that in mind. If you are using a 3rd level spell slot, you're going to be dealing 3d8 plus your dex mod damage with the weapon, and then if you use a 5th level spell slot, then it's going to be 4d8 plus your dex mod damage with the weapon. So very, very useful. Again, I am very pleasantly surprised by how well this build is performing. You know, running it through pretty much the end area where we are just fighting a ton of enemies at once, and really our mobility is kind of the key to fighting large groups of enemies, because we can just get out of range of all the enemy melee dudes, have them come to us, smack the shit out of them, and then run away again. It's actually a very good kiting build. And then, of course, for the swarms of enemies that are on the weaker side, we have Fireball. We have access to the wizard spells we need to do crowd control and to do AoE damage. So it's a very flexible build, but at the same time, you're not reliant on your spell slots all that much. You need, of course, your 5th level spell slots to have a Shadowblade, or whatever your highest level spell slot is to have Shadowblade. You definitely want to have 3rd level spell slots for haste, and that's pretty much about it. You know, maybe your 1st levels, your 2nd levels, you're gonna end up burning on shield spells or mirror images, things to keep you alive. But overall, even without those resources, you are still able to attack 4 times once you have your extra attack, once you have your bonus action. So it's gonna be a very consistent build overall. You're not gonna ever feel like you're completely gassed out of your resources like how a wizard normally would be if they ran out of spell slots. You know, if you play a full wizard and you run out of spell slots, you are just going to be slinging firebolts for the rest of the fight until you get a long rest, which is a little bit depressing. But with this build, you still have plenty of options. Even when you're dried up out of spell slots, you're going to be making attacks. You're going to be using your mobility to stay ahead of the fight. Yeah, I am very much hyped for this build. If I go through another playthrough, chances are I might go for this multi-class build. You know, I am looking at a few other ones, such as the Hexblade Paladin. Hexadin is a classic one. Multi-classing that with Sorcerer on top would be absolutely devastating. I'm sure there's a few other ones as well. The Life Domain alongside the Stars Druid is a pretty common healing subclass or multi-class, and that is going to be very potent, no doubt. Tried it a little bit in this video, well, not this video, but in a fight at the end game of Baldur's Gate 3, and it was healing a substantial amount. And then as far as the other multi-classes, I am very interested to try the Swarm Ranger with either the Stars Druid or maybe even Arcane Archer, finding a way to kind of make use of the early game features, because it has very strong level 3 features. Mixing that up with something like Stars Druid to give us a bonus action attack, or maybe Arcane Archer so that we have extra options with our range. Gonna be messing around with some interesting builds, and I just saw that Morgana Evelyn had a video on Giant Barbarian, a Frost build for Giant Barbarian. God damn, am I excited to watch that video, because it is looking quite hypey. Just all of the options. I'm actually very pleasantly surprised by patch 8 that the options we are getting from this, they have really spent some time to flesh them out so that they're more than just, you know, what their variants are in D&D 5e. If you look at something like the Shadow Sorcerer in D&D 5e, the Hound of Ill Omen is basically just a dire wolf that gets disadvantage to, you know, the target that's next to it. But they've really given that summon some personality, some really cool and interesting abilities that I was completely taken aback by. You know, same with the Bladesong. The access to this blade singing climax means that over the course of the fight, you can either focus on casting leveled spells or you can focus on melee attacks, and you're going to be getting different things out of it. I'm actually very interested to see other people who are probably going to come up with spell casting builds for the Bladesinger that are going to synergize a little bit of melee and a lot of spell casting, whereas this one is going to be very much focused on melee damage and then kind of shoring up our defenses with magic here and there. So it is a little bit less traditional of the Spellblade, but that's because I want it to be a lot more, a lot less resource reliant. That's kind of what I was going for. That's why we're taking the lows of Rogue. Rogue is very much a class that is not resource reliant on anything. You can do your sneak attack every single turn as long as you can meet the requirements for it. You know, there's never going to be a drain on how many times you can sneak attack in a fight, other than your creativity and your ability to hide or get advantage. So having that additional access, especially with Thief Rogue, which gives us a second bonus action, we can dash twice, we can disengage and then dash, we can hide, and then we can reposition and get advantage again. There's tons of options that's kind of given by the Thief Rogue, and it also makes it not feel bad at all for when we have to use our bonus action to do things like, you know, drink a potion or run around and jump. We're going to have that second bonus action, which means we can still make our offhand attacks. Just really having the flexibility in this build, I think it's going to be so much fun. So I'm really hyped for it. I hope you guys are hyped for it. Stay tuned for more patch 8 builds and also some general D&D 5e content. I know I'm kind of ranting at this point. I'm just going to continue to rant. I have been, at least for the last 5 years or so, playing D&D non-stop, and it's just my current obsession. You know, I obsess about D&D probably more than video games at this this point. And I'm someone who's played video games for their whole life. Now, what I am really excited, though, is to share with you some content that I am making for D&D 5e. I'm going to be working on some homebrew subclasses. I'm going to be working on tips and guides for newer players, even for veteran players. You know, things like making villains compelling characters that have interesting motivations and backstories, adding on combat options to allow players to really feel like they are fighting a villain that has a reason why they have gotten to the point in life where they are at, and being able to deal with them in ways that aren't necessarily just a duel to the death. So those are the kinds of things that I'm thinking about working on for D&D. Of course, it's coming very slowly, and I am making recorded sessions as well, so cutting those out or cutting those down to feasible clips, stuff that I would want to put on YouTube, is still something that I am very much thinking about, but I'm really excited for it. I haven't been making much content. Pretty much there was a lull for about a year and a half, or I don't know, maybe even 2 years. I wasn't making any videos, but we're gonna try to get back into it. So I can't promise you how long we're gonna be back into it, but I can definitely tell you I'm gonna be trying my best. So thank you very much for watching the video today. If you've made it this far, I mean, really, thank you so much. It means the world to me that I still have a pretty decent amount of subscribers, to have a big audience to share to. And I can't wait to expand for Baldur's Gate and for regular D&D. I am very much excited for it. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.